So I wanted to explain to you my most recent meltdown, but I also wanted to come from a place of understanding why these things happen and learning about how this works for me as an autistic adult. Um, I think where I want to come from is just analysing what was going on in my recent meltdown and kind of being able to pick apart why it happened, the build up, those kind of things, and just kind of explain to you so that maybe if you've got family members who have autism, or you're dealing with struggles yourself and you're not understanding them, how you can kind of understand this process, what's happening in your brain and why. So looking at what happened in my meltdown, there was a point where basically everything became too much. There is evidence to suggest that autistic people have 67% more neurons in their prefrontal cortex than, say, the average human being. So they will be taking in details and information, and it will be really hard to filter out all the details. So if something happens, it feels bigger than if you're kind of just in a normal place, and it just feels so much bigger. So my reaction to things, I find I have very big emotions, and they can be so beautiful and wonderful, and I can look at things and think, wow, look at that, that's incredible. And I can have really big emotions to things that I'm struggling with, and if something comes along that I'm struggling with, all of a sudden it can be it can overwhelm me and be all encompassing. So this is what happened. I got to the point at the end of the day where I ended up rocking back and forth on the side of the bed and just kind of started to repeat a loop in my head of, I want this to stop. I'm not going to repeat what I was saying exactly because it may be a little bit too triggering. But it was just wanting things to stop. That was the overall overwhelming kind of understanding. It was a repetitive loop. Now, one of the things that I will say is that autistic people do repetitive movements as a self-soothing thing. So I think if you think of it a little bit like a mum rocking her baby to sleep, that rocking motion, rocking back and forth, repetitive pacing, anything like that. It could be just twiddling with your hair. It could be absolutely anything. That is actually a self-soothing mechanism for the brain. So what we're doing when we're going into that meltdown is we're actually soothing the brain. We're learning how to soothe the brain. Then my repetitive loop, the repetitiveness of my brain, and it just kind of wanted things to stop. It wanted my brain to stop working. It wanted all my thoughts to stop and just escape the overwhelm. So what I did was I just kind of waited, really, and let everything kind of go through me, and I just kept repeating these words, and I couldn't actually reach out of the brain to get to speak to anybody or anything like that. I can't communicate while I was in there. Now, the reason why this does happen is because you have a prefrontal cortex right at the front here. And there was a huge, a wonderful piece of research done where somebody actually damaged this part of their brain, and I can't remember the name of the person, but what happened was his actual personality changed. So he was a really kind of calm, and I think he was known as a really good member of the community for a long time. And he had an accident, and he damaged the part of the prefrontal cortex, and his decision making abilities were reduced. So he actually started to react badly to things. He would have aggressive outbursts, things like that. And he just completely changed character. So what happens when autistic people go into a meltdown is their prefrontal cortex goes offline. It literally goes offline. And I felt that happening. I felt the prefrontal cortex go completely offline. I could not find the words in my brain to reach out and say anything to anyone, or to reach out and answer my husband, or anything like that. I was just rocking in a rocking motion, repeating these sentences over and over again. So that is how it works. Your prefrontal cortex is where all your decision making happens. It's where your filtering of the world happens. You filter your world through this prefrontal cortex, and it's absolutely incredible how it works. But for people with autism, we don't have that filter in our prefrontal cortex. It means that we take in the world at 100, probably 200%, I would say, all of the time. Whereas most people's brains kind of filter through and they go, okay, well, we're going to pick up this detail, that detail, and that's it. We're not, everything else kind of gets blurred out. It's a little bit like focus on your when with your eyes, or you think of a focus on a camera. So basically, what your brain usually does, what your prefrontal cortex normally does, is it will focus on certain things and it will blur out the rest. And if there's details that don't need to be, your brain doesn't need, it will filter them out. However, in autistic people, that filter is lessened. So you don't filter out all the details, you take it all in. So imagine how hard that must be when you think about taking a picture and you can never focus in on one specific thing. You would find that really hard because you're taking in all the information, and that's what happens in the brain with autistic people, is that they take in all the information. So I just wanted to kind of explain what was happening in my meltdown, and from a very kind of psychological point of view, because it is really just a different way of your brain working, and you can learn how to actually reduce your sensory overload. One of the really cool things that came out of having this meltdown was the next day, I could feel what they call the rumble. Some people call it the rumble. And it was just, I could feel the emotions building and building and building. And I just sat down and I sat myself down and said, this is going to pass. This is not a bad day. This is just a bad moment. You're just having a 2-second moment and it will pass. Just nice and calm now. Just, you're having a moment. It's just a moment. It doesn't have to continue. It doesn't have to go into this loop. Just let this moment pass. And I was able to manage it. Now, as I get older, I think I'm going to be able to manage it even more, understand it even more, get better at dealing with my emotions, and dealing with these big emotions that I think a lot of us autistic adults understand, is you just have these huge reactions and they seem really, really bad. But one of the first things I would say is, as soon as you come out of that, please, please, please give yourself so much self-compassion, because what this means is that your brain is just working exactly as it's meant to. It's exactly the way the brain works. You have this different way of filtering the world, and you don't filter out things as easily. So you might not find things as light and gentle as other people do, but you have these amazing big emotions. That means that you can look at something and see such intense beauty in a moment. And that's where I feel my poetry comes to life, is where I can look at a sunset and all of a sudden my eyes start filling up, and I'm filled with this big emotion, this big, beautiful emotion. And that is the beauty of this. However, there is obviously always going to be the negative of things, and things don't come with just one feeling. They come with two feelings. We all come with the positive and the negative. And one of the negative things about that is that you won't filter the world the same way. You're going to feel things, and they're going to be big feelings. They're going to be huge, but you can cope with them because you've got a big heart and you are absolutely fine as you are. And this is what this is all about, is telling yourself in those times when you're going through autistic meltdowns that actually this will pass and things are going to get better.